Have you ever heard of a company that acted like a country? I mean, a corporation that literally commanded its own armies, founded colonies, and built a full-blown empire? Well, that's exactly what we're digging into today. This is the incredible story of the Dutch West India Company.
And that really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? How on earth does a private business get the power to act like a sovereign nation? Figuring that out is the key to understanding the staggering wealth, the immense influence, and the eventual collapse of this corporate empire.
So, the secret sauce, if you can call it that, was this thing called a chartered company. Now, this was way more than just a business license. Think of it like the government outsourcing some of its most fundamental powers, colonization, administration, even warfare, all to a private, for-profit enterprise.
Okay, so let's look at the blueprint. The charter for the Dutch West India Company, or GWC, wasn't just some business plan. No, this was a design for conquest and total control right from day one.
I mean, just look at the powers the Dutch government handed over in 1621. We're talking a 24-year exclusive monopoly on all trade in the Atlantic, the right to colonize land in the Americas, the power to raise your own army and navy. You could set up your own courts, pass your own laws, and even appoint your own governors. The GWC was, for all intents and purposes, the government in the Atlantic.
Now, you've probably heard of its more famous older sibling, the Dutch East India Company, the VOC. And while the VOC was a behemoth in Asia, swimming in cash and dominating the spice trade, the GWC was different. It was smaller, scrappier, and born during a war with Spain. Its charter wasn't just about trading goods. It was a state-sanctioned license to attack and plunder enemy ships. It was built for a fight.
And that license to fight is exactly what defined its early strategy. The company's first path to real wealth and influence wasn't through trading commodities, it was through seizing gold and silver by force. And this was no small-time operation. By 1623, investors, including the Dutch government itself, had pumped in over 7 million guilders. To put that in perspective, that's nearly 100 million euros in today's money. This wasn't just startup capital, it was a war chest.
And they put that money to use right away. After getting its charter in 21 and launching its first big operations, it only took a few years before they hit the jackpot. 1628, that's the year a single event changed everything and bankrolled their entire colonial dream.
In 1628, Admiral Piet Heim did the unthinkable. He captured the entire Spanish treasure fleet, loaded with silver from the colonies. This one heist was so incredibly profitable that it paid massive dividends to shareholders, cleared the company's debts, and gave them the cash to fund their most ambitious invasion yet, the conquest of Portuguese Brazil. But here's the thing. Plunder is a gamble, not a business model. The company's directors knew they couldn't rely on one-off heists forever. To build a sustainable empire, they made a strategic pivot to a far more systematic and, frankly, far more brutal source of profit. And this was the shift. The GWC started using its military might not just to steal treasure, but to control the most valuable supply chains in the Atlantic. We're talking sugar, we're talking furs, but most profitable of all was the trade in enslaved human beings, the people needed to work the plantations. The company essentially became a logistics firm for human trafficking. The scale of this is just hard to comprehend. In just the last 16 years of its first charter alone, the company transported more than 53,000 enslaved Africans. The trade in people became the grim, dark engine of the GWC's corporate empire.
And over its entire history, the company was directly responsible for trafficking over 140,000 people. Think about that. A single corporation became one of the biggest slave traders in the Atlantic world.
But even with all its power, the GWC couldn't control everything. As the official monopoly holder, they handled about a quarter of the total Dutch slave trade. But you know what? The profits were so huge that they created a massive black market. Illegal Dutch smugglers actually moved just as many people. The GWC's influence was huge, for sure, but its control was never absolute.
And we have to be crystal clear here. While you might see old paintings showing these beautiful romantic landscapes in places like Dutch Brazil, the reality for the enslaved people who made that economy possible was, as one source puts it, a living hell. The company's wealth and influence were built directly on a foundation of unimaginable human suffering.
You know, an empire built on such an aggressive and expensive model, well, it was just fundamentally unstable. The very things that fueled the company's incredible rise, war, conquest, that sprawling monopoly, they would eventually become the cracks in its own foundation.
So, the collapse basically came down to a few key things. First, that long, costly war to hold on to Brazil, they lost it in 1654. Second, the cost of just maintaining all those forts, fleets, and armies led to crippling debt. All the while, you had fierce competition from other countries and those illegal smugglers eating away at their profits. The Atlantic was just too big, and their monopoly was impossible to enforce.
And by 1674, it was over. The company was officially bankrupt, crushed by a debt of 36 million guilders, a truly astronomical sum back then. The very ambition that created all that wealth and influence had finally sealed its fate. The first GWC was dissolved.
A new GWC was chartered right away to replace it, but it was really just a shadow of the original. It was smaller, way less powerful, and had its right to wage war taken away. Its main job became managing the African forts and continuing the slave trade, but even that monopoly was eventually lost in 1738 because of financial problems and constant competition.
So without the power to fight wars and with its trade monopolies crumbling, the company's final decline was slow, but it was completely inevitable. Finally, in 1791, the Dutch government just decided not to renew the charter. The Dutch West India Company was officially dissolved, and all its leftover debts, its colonies, and its forts were simply nationalized, taken back by the same state that had created it almost 200 years earlier. And all of this leaves us with one last big thought. The story of the Dutch West India Company is this really stark reminder of the incredible power a corporation can wield. It forces you to ask, what happens when the pursuit of profit is given the power of a state? And what kind of legacy is left behind when an empire is built not for a flag, but for its shareholders?